We get to the Star Guardians, and it is just, a cold, fathomless eyes, a grin that promised nothing, Zoe. And it's like, what? What? One of these is not like the other.
Yeah, it's like, Stephen King, is that you? They bring in a ghostwriter, but
Oh my God.
we have
The letters of Valorant start to shift, and it turns out to actually be in Vermont.
Welcome to Casuals of Runeterra, Part 6 of our Star Guardian special. I'm your host, Ryan, here with the other host, Hedge.
What do you mean special? This is the new normal. This is the new world order. The Stardian order.
Yeah, this is getting ridiculous. It's going to keep going. We're not done yet. We're not close to done.
Not close.
I mean, we're maybe on the other side of this, right? The second half.
I mean, for what's in existence right now, yes. But then give
that's
it
right.
Give it like what, 6 more days, and then we're back in it.
All right, housekeeping up top. You can listen to us everywhere. Contact us at podcastcore@gmail.com. Visit us at podcastcore.com for all of our info. Follow us on any platform that you prefer, or all the platforms, because that helps us with discoverability. And leave a like, a comment, and a short review. We appreciate it. But the easiest way is word of mouth. Tell a friend to become corrupted by darkness by listening to the Casuals of Runeterra podcast. We're back with more Star Guardians.
Stardians.
Stardians.
Yeah, as far as we mentioned at the start of this is part 6. If you haven't listened to our other episodes, please go listen to them, not only because we want you to, but also because it all kind of ties together. We covered a lot of ground already. So if you're just jumping into this now, thank you for jumping in, but you might be a little lost if you don't listen to the previous episodes, because we have covered pretty much the beginning of the Star Guardians. We've covered the first short stories where they went to Camp Targon to meet the next team. We covered the bios of both of the teams. We even covered a slumber party before we got into this story. And this is still just the second part of this story. So there's a bunch going on. And specifically with part 5, continuing this story, we know that the city of Valoran is under attack by some cosmic force. And the previous members of Ari's team, Xayah and Rakan, have shown their faces, so we know that they're alive, but they have been corrupted. And during the fight between the Star Guardians and Rakan and Xayah, Miss Fortune, or Sarah, goes off to save a civilian who happens to be Akali. But the civilian, Akali, decides to run off to find her friend Kaisa. And that's where we pick up, is with Miss Fortune trying to keep Akali alive while the world is practically ending.
Yeah. If you're jumping in here and you're just chilling with the vibes, then you really just like the sound of our voices, because this is definitely not a place to jump in.
Yeah, this isn't the place. But, I mean, I get it. Like, Ryan, I could listen to your voice. I don't know about mine, but yeah, I understand it for you. Yeah. You carry the weight. You carry the weight of the people that are just jumping in now.
The vocal weight. So, as Hetch mentioned, we pick up on this story after Akali runs off. She went in the direction of the purple blast we saw. Sarah mentions that she thinks it's Syndra casting something, but Akali doesn't know who a Syndra is. But anyway, she's off in that direction, and Sarah leaps into the sky and starts scanning the city, right? It's time to do some superhero type shit. And she finds out where she is so that she can stop her. She heads in that direction, and she finds Akali deep in some rubble trying to dig through it to get out a person that's buried. She can only see the cloth of this, whatever this person's wearing, kind of hanging out the edges of the rubble. And then, there's spells kind of flying close overhead to where Akali is, and she calls out to Akali.
Yeah, and with this flight really does carry a lot of the scene for us as far as really setting the stage to build the map, so to speak, because Sarah's getting to see just how widespread the destruction is all across Valoran, and this is also the point that that Miss Sarah or Miss Fortune is fully aware that this is Zoe's doing. So a lot of this destruction isn't just random debris falling around. It's black holes or portals being opened up by Zoe, and the things flying across the sky are actual paddle stars, like Zoe's ability in game. And we get to see like a lot of the different destruction, rubble, and a lot of casualties that are happening, like what Miss Fortune comes across with Akali here. So she just comes back down because, she was surveying the field being a superhero, and now it's like, oh, it's still this girl, and I still got to keep her alive.
Yeah, she mentions a couple times in the previous part and here that she's babysitting. She's on babysitter duty right now. She doesn't even have the time to do the Star Guardian stuff, and that's kind of some foreshadowing. And there's more foreshadowing here where she ignores what she's saying, what Sarah's saying, until Sarah actually pushes her aside and shoots a piece of rubble that was flying towards her, saving her life, but adding to the rubble on top of this person, which is a dark scene for them to write out. And then as that happens, she grabs Akali and kind of launches them both into the air to get away from the area. And at this point, Akali's in tears and she's yelling that, Sarah doesn't know for sure that that person under the rubble can't be saved. And that type of delusion, Sarah's kind of given up trying to talk through or reason with Akali at this point, because those same delusions she's having are the same ones she had when the incident on the quote unquote lonely planet happened with Ari a long time ago.
Yeah, and this is like it's a really dark way to show that, Miss Fortune has grown as a Star Guardian, and has grown to understand Ari's decision. Because, that's something that she's been struggling with for ever since the Ari's team's been introduced. Like, the more about Miss Fortune we learn, the more that we learn that she struggles with the loss of her previous teammates. And so, it's one thing to say like, oh, look, she's growing as a person, but no, shooting more rubble onto this person's body and then just looking at Akali like, I made a call. I made a call. Yeah. And it's just like, look, okay, we get it. She learned a lesson, but damn, you got to go this hard about it, Riot?
Yeah, this whole chapter is pretty much foreshadowing for later. And this, by the way, this part is called The Darkest Night, and this chapter is What Was Lost. And this takes us into the next chapter. And we also need to mention, we talk about Lux and how Lux is clearly dealing with anxiety. A lot of how she's written represents that well. If you haven't figured out by now, Sarah is suffering from PTSD. That is what this is. It has been for the longest time. And now that we actually have galactic shit happening on quote unquote Runeterra, this is bringing up more things, interacting with characters like Akali that are behaving like she used to when she was more naive. Interacting with these civilians is just bringing up more and more of that. And they constantly have been referring to her trying to push these negative thoughts and bad feelings back. And I bring that up because this will come into play later down the road.
Yeah, and I mean, PTSD is definitely the word for it, because it's something that Miss Fortune keeps saying up to this point, is that it's so much easier to just be fighting bad guys. Yep. Like, it's all this other stuff, like all these thoughts and everything. It's too difficult for her to deal with. So it's easier to be the hero instead of having to deal with herself. Yep. Well, if that's not PTSD, I've learned nothing.
So this takes us to chapter 7, labeled Promises Like Fire. And this is where Sarah's now in her head. She's kind of thinking about her original team and how they were taken out one by Zoe. She says that Rakan was the first one. to get clapped, and then followed by Nico, who took an arrow to the knee. Wait, how old is that? How old does that mean? No.
Man. Hey, it's really not that old because I mean, like, what the last release of Elders?
Oh, they just kept releasing it, so
yeah, it was only like 2 years ago.
But yeah, no, Nico takes a spell to the chest, and it's not really mentioned how Zaya died, which is on purpose because Sarah's kind of hesitant about what actually happened to Zaya during that event. So this is related to everything we mentioned earlier. In the midair, so we're still in the air, right? She's flying off, whatever. Akali keeps demanding that Sarah put her down, and then Akali finally mentions that she's looking for her friend Kaisa. Now, this is something she's never mentioned up until this point of just being difficult, which is an important factor because Sarah's just been lost to this point of why are you being so ridiculous? Are you just having a concussion? Are you having, are you going through the denial and stuff like the PTSD I deal with?
Yeah, I mean, and the bottom line is that Akali has been very difficult up to this point and hasn't. The only information she's given Sarah up to now is that every time Sarah says, "Hey, kid," because she's tried to keep Akali from dying, Akali responds with, "My name is Akali."
Yeah.
Like, that's the only information she's gotten up to this point. So it's like, I'm looking for Kaisa, and it's like, okay, thank God you're talking now.
Yeah.
You're not treating me like a hallucination that's trying to kill you. So, I mean, that's great as far as for Sarah, but it's not any better because it's like, I mean, the whole world essentially is falling apart here. The entire city is going to be looking for people. So now it's just like, okay, well, I've got to go do the Star Guardian thing. Like, this is what I'm here to do. So I got to go and join the fight. And of course, Akali is looking at Sarah going, will you find Kaisa? And if you've ever been around like dark humored friends like mine, the first thing that you don't do when it's something you've got to say goodbye to quickly is give it a name. So, for at the beginning, Sarah could just be like, yeah, you know what? If I see a friend, I'll save them.
Yeah.
But no, now it's like, can you go save Kaisa? And it's like, you gave her a name. You gave her a name. Now I've got a promise that I'll try. Great. Thanks for that. But some jokes aside, Sarah does, give a promise to Akali that she'll do her best. But she flies away knowing full well that it's likely to be a promise that she can't keep.
Yeah. And Sarah's not really in a place where she can do anything other than her job at this point, right? So this then takes us to chapter 8, which is a ringing voice. And Sarah's now flying towards Valorant Park, and she sees Zaya Rakan, but not the other team. So obviously this is concerning due to her previous worries. And Zaya immediately attacks her. Listen, I love the consistency that Zaya's always on site. It doesn't matter what's going on. If she sees her target, she's about the action.
She the only thing that she might change is take a second to take her earrings out. But it is on site, and it has been absolutely consistent up to this point of just hatred in eyes, go for the kill.
Yeah, and at this point, it's not even throwing her feather. She just dive bombs at Sarah, and she ends up getting knocked away by this blast of wind. So that's when Janna and Soraka show up, and they arrive with Lulu and Poppy riding on their shoulders. And then soon after, sprinting behind them is Lux, Ezreal, and Jinx. And proper to Jinx's personality as well, she wastes no time lining up a rocket shot, and it actually clips Rakan. And now you have this back and forth where, Zaya responds by throwing a quill at throwing a quill, at Jinx. Ezreal deflects it, and then Sarah kind of asks them, hey, can y'all clear a path so I can get to Syndra and see what's going on?
Right. And this is kind of a hard scene to really cover because it's there's so much going on in this fight.
Yeah.
we would just be reading it verbatim. So if this is the kind of stuff that you do enjoy, this is a part of the story I would encourage like to go read, because until Riot decides to bless us with, arcane special that is just the Stardians, well, we this is the best we've got. So something to go read, because a lot of the descriptions of the fighting in this chapter and going forward are super cool. Like they're super cool, mixed in with a bit of corniness to be like, haha, we come from a video game.
Yeah, they're well done. They're not Forgotten Realms level. Like, you're not going to get any descriptions like, restored and doing shit, because that's kind of peak level describing action. But this does a really solid job of keeping it brisk too, right?
This does a solid job for being a short story.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah,
like, this is a great short story. If we're going into books, no, this doesn't even make the list.
Yeah, it does pretty well. So Ezreal does something uncharacteristic after this point, where he's like, yeah, we can clear away, and he teleports to Rakan and just tackles them, and they just start brawling like two dudes outside of a bar just brawling. Right. And that's something that everybody's like, okay, that's an option. And then Xayah responds by dashing over to try to help him. But Jinx follows up with a barrage of bullets, because that's what she's good at. And Sarah immediately just takes off in the direction of Syndra. And she ends up passing through Paddlestar Circle, where she sees Syndra and a little girl in a swing, who we know is Zoe.
Yeah, and this has been something that has been built up like ever since the second video that they put out for the Star Guardians, and for anyone following, it was something that is telegraphed in this story, because it's paddle stars falling from the sky, not just stars falling. So it's like, okay, we finally get to see the big bad. And I love that the first big bad we get is Zoe, because it's kind of like this, that same spirit of Lulu, of just quirkiness, except this time, like, the dialogue for Zoe in this story is very dark, very, very dark. So we can get into it.
Yeah, she kind of looks at Sarah, she walks in and she smiles, and then there's this passage that's kind of eerie. It says, laughter on a lonely planet, friends screaming, falling around her, the taste of chaos and magic scorching her tongue, cold, fathomless eyes, a grin that promised nothing and everything. Zoe.
Yeah, like again, it's like the same take as like with Lulu, these very eccentric and whimsical characters, whereas with Lulu they dug into it. Yeah. With Zoe, they went, hey, what if she was really messed up in the head?
Yeah.
Like, what if it was Jinx that was Zoe?
Yeah, you're right. This is probably the biggest character shift out of everyone when they translate it to this universe for the purposes of the story.
Yeah, like, and I mean, and we covered Zoe when we went over like Runeterra champions from the card game. So if you want, you could go listen to that episode to get an idea of what Zoe's like from traditional Runeterra. But Zoe's very much just a kid, like an innocent girl with just infinite cosmic power. So then she can literally take celestial beings and treat them like house pets, which she kind of does because she's just a little girl.
Yeah.
So that is her character, is just little girl trying to have fun.
Yeah.
And then we get to the Star Guardians, and it is just, a cold, fathomless eyes, a grin that promised nothing. Zoe. And it's like, what? What? One of these is not like the other.
Yeah, it's like, Stephen King, is that you? They bring in a ghostwriter, but
oh my god, we have the letters of Valorant start to shift, and it turns out to actually be in Vermont.
Okay, that's pretty good. Gotta keep it grounded. So Syndra, seeing Sarah coldly, tells her, why are you here? You shouldn't be here. And Sarah thinks, well, have they been fighting? What's been going on? But Syndra doesn't look like she's harmed in any manner or even tired. And then Zoe kind of starts her monologue type situation where she begins bringing memories of the last time they fought when the old team died. And then she starts to get aggro where she actually attacks Sarah from the back using the paddle star shenanigans, and it sears her skin with a star shaped black like emblem that begins writhing in her back. And then Syndra, in response to that, puts distance between herself and this situation and kind of just still just watching. And at that moment is when Zaya kind of catches up to them and she walks up and puts her foot on Sarah, keeping her on the ground. And Zoe comments that, there's a lot going on here dialogue wise, bouncing around. And Zoe makes a sly comment at Zaya that her new friends are probably stronger than Zaya, which is why she cares about them more than Zaya, and this pisses Zaya off. She throws a feather at Syndra, and then her multi-familiars eat them, which is hilarious. And then Rakan arrives because he has to go where Zaya is, and Lux follows him. There's a lot going on here. But the situation that's set up seems to be where Zoe, even though it seems like Zaya and Rakan are working on behalf of Zoe, sorta, she's kind of egging them on to do this stuff and looking down on them and playing on the situation rather than having any clear goal.
Yeah, like Zoe's definitely acting more like a puppet master, but not
Good choice of
necessarily.
words.
Yeah, like, but she's not
Wink, wink.
necessarily like fully in control.
Yeah.
Which like kind of feeds into the idea of her just egging Zaya on because it's like, well, for whatever Zoe's plans are, she's clearly like, hey, I still need you to treat Sarah as on site. So go ham. And I'm gonna stir the pot to make sure that you're going ham. Now, one of the things that's very interesting about everybody showing up to this scene, specifically with Sarah showing up first, is that Zoe was fighting Syndra because they were guided here by the explosions caused by Multi, which is Syndra's familiar. And Syndra is kind of unharmed at this point. So there's even moments that it's written out where it's like, hey, Syndra is pretty dang strong because we know that Rakan and Zaya were strong enough to hold off nearly 8 Star Guardians by themselves. And Zoe is the one pulling the string, so you would assume she's stronger. But Syndra's holding her own against that. Uh, so this kind of plays into that whole idea of like, that story that has been set up that no one really fully trusts Syndra and no one knows what Syndra is actually up to. But it's not something that they can focus on right now because Zaya has got her earrings out and she's gonna curb stomp a bitch. So it's like there's no time to think about it, but we've noticed that Syndra's strong as fuck.
Yeah. So now Zaya walks back over to where Sarah is, and she begins kind of torching her with the gruesome details of what happened that day or night on that planet. And Zoe's, summoning stars that are raining down, and they start to separate that specific group, those three, from the rest of the group. And as she did this, Sarah can now see because Zaya's kind of holding her face up to look into her eyes. She can see that some Zoe's like feeding on the dark energy of Zaya's anger and pain, and then Sarah's back is also throbbing and pulsing with that corruption, and it seems like Zoe's feeding on her. So they're now isolated. Zoe's feeding on both of them. This is not a good situation. And then Sarah hears like someone screaming, other than the voices in her head, and they're telling her, don't give up. And Zoe's also confused to who this is, and the stars stop. They stop falling, and as that happens, Rakan kind of runs over towards where Sarah is, stops himself, grabs Zaya, and ends up pulling her back away from Zoe, kind of being hesitant on what's going on. And then Sarah notices that the girl yelling is Kaisa.
Yeah, this is a fun reveal because up to this point, no one has met Kaisa other than Akali. Akali and Kaisa have been entirely separate from this entire storyline and have only been roped in when Akali had to be saved from the flower stand being exploded. And it's really interesting that this essentially a civilian calls out over this superhero battle of just, words of encouragement. And not only does it resonate well enough with the heroes to where Sarah looks at her and goes, that has to be Kaisa. That has to be the girl that Akali is basically killing herself for. Not only does it resonate to have that conclusion, but it also resonates to where this diabolical evil that is strong enough to destroy a planet just stops what she's doing. It's like, who's that? Who said that? No. Who's interrupting my show? Like, so I like this scene kind of like makes no sense to me
Yeah, it has
because
some Joker vibes to it.
yeah, like there's definitely some Joker vibes, but it's like it's the fact that it's like it carries around like the whole atmosphere for the Star Guardians as well as Zoe. Like it put everything on hold, and it's so weird to me, but it's like borderline entertaining because it's just like what, like was it the tone? Like was it the inflection that she put on her words? I don't know. Like it's crazy, but it's just a normal person going, "Hang in there, guys."
Oh yeah, it's a mix of that awkward environment with the cheesiness of believe in yourself, you can do it, never give up. That's kind of what Kaisa's doing here. And Zoe's kind of telling her, "Oh, shut up, shut up, shut up." She's ignoring her and just kind of keeps spreading that message, that good news.
And as for everyone that's been keeping up with our prior episodes, we mentioned the Sentai genre of Japanese media a lot. And then this is it. This is exactly what it is. It's hold on to the good feelings, never give up, love will conquer all. And like this is the embodiment of that spirit, and it's literally just a normal high school girl just screaming.
Well, listen, we all saw Dragon Ball. We all saw Dragon Ball Z. And we know how strong spirits are. So all of the Star Guardians around them are being very careful and just kind of watching, just like how Rakan is watching, because the way they're set up in this park, like where they're all located, they know if Zoe does something, they can't get to Kaisa fast enough. So they have to kind of play it very safe. And then suddenly two stars kind of crash into the ground, thinking they're paddle stars. But it turns out to be Ari and Nico. And finally, Zoe's like, fuck this, and goes nuts.
And this is absolutely huge because you know that we've been going over just how delicate of a line that Miss Fortune's been walking ever since the beginning of this attack with her own mental state, because she's been worried about Ari. She's also been upset at Ari for not letting her in on whatever's going on. The moment she sees Zaya and Rakan, she remembers her old team, and Ari, Zaya, Rakan, Miss Fortune, that's only 4 people. So it's like, hey, the 5th, could Nico still be alive? So this is a huge turning point as far as for Miss Fortune. So it is nice that we're getting this part from her perspective. But it is definitely this weird kind of stalemate of just everyone holding still so Kaisa doesn't die is entirely broken by it. Like whatever spell Kaisa was able to just play on people through the sheer power of the drama club has now disappeared with Ari and Nico showing up, because we go into hyperdrive from here.
Yeah, and this finally resolves and brings the light and shadow video that we've referenced so many times, that was kind of like an Ari Gaiden story, back into the fold, because we now know after Ari shows up at the end of that video, they leave, and she brings Nico back to this point where Zoe's now in Runeterra.
Yeah.
So that takes us to chapter 9, The Monster. Which is I mean, when I think of Zoe, that's the first thing I think of. That's the first word that comes, word association.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Someone who can like basically imprison Aurelian's soul has to be a monster, right?
True. So Zoe's now like screaming unnaturally, and that scream turns into this gross laughter, and then she begins to transform, which is quite the sight, into some kind of chaos monster, as it's described. They say like her mouth grows, her limbs grow longer, and they start to contort. And Jinx is like, fuck this. She tries to shoot her immediately, but the bullets end up passing through her. And Nico mentions that she can't be hit or attack us during this transformation. So now it's time to figure out a plan.
And this is really cool because like it kind of gives us a little bit of knowledge of just how much Nico has seen ever since that day, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Because this is not the first, like Nico's just reacting to this like, this is not my first rodeo, so this is what we have to do, and she spells out everything. But it's kind of weird because we know that it's more of a literary device to tell you that it's like, this is what's happening to Zoe. So it kind of has like a bit of a narrator vibe to it.
Yeah.
Like I feel like this could have been a scene that we kind of that they could have sped over a little bit more, of just let the bullets pass through Zoe, have everyone go, huh? And then just, like Zaya and Rakan it's still Zaya. It's still on site. Like,
oh yeah,
you could have let us figure it out, right?
Yeah. So at this time, Nico runs over to Kaisa and is able to get her. And Sarah tells her, Akali is fine. I know you're Kaisa. You guys are friends. And as she says this, Akali comes running across the park by Ezreal to where they are. And then Kaisa runs to her and they hug. And, Zaya uses this moment, obviously, like we've mentioned so many times, to begin another attack. But Janna is like in full pissed mode. And she ends up trapping her and Rakan with a tornado. And at that point, Soraka is like, we got bigger things to worry about. She points out that Zoe is now a mountain of chaos. And she was almost done transforming. So like I said, they begin trying to plan, okay, well, what are we going to do next?
And I feel so bad for Miss Fortune here because it's like Akali was already such a thorn in her side.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I can't keep this girl still. Like the world is ending. Find shelter. Like shelter in place. It's 2020 all over again. And so then now she's wounded. She's dealing with the corruption of Zoe's attack like on her back. And we like right before we go into this chapter, there's a little illustration that just kind of shows like how like grotesque that the corruption is, and they keep describing how much pain that Miss Fortune's in. So now she's wounded. She's trying to fight this off. She's watching Zoe transform into a monster, and then here comes Akali. Here comes this girl running across the park again. So not only am I back on babysitting duty, I'm now hurt, and there's two babies.
Yep.
It's like, tell me you're a single mother without telling me you're a single mother.
Oh my goodness.
Like, I feel for it. I feel for her in this scene. But
true. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah,
the struggle is real.
The struggle
That's the
is
metaphor
real.
here.
Yeah, the struggle is real. But as far as for like, the Star Guardians trying to make a plan, we again are kind of seeing this more from Miss Fortune's perspective, and she is put on babysitting duty again, and it's not for the same reasons as before, where Lux benched her because she was too close to whatever was happening. Now she's on babysitting duty because you're hurt. Like, you're hurt. You can barely stand. So, all right, too bad. Go watch the kids.
Yeah, and as this back and forth is going on, Zaya and Rakan are able to break from Janna's tornado spell, and Zaya goes to attack Nico, and luckily it turns out that the one she attacks is the clone, and the real one appears behind her, leg sweeps her, and then takes off into the forest nearby. And then Rakan throws a feather at Ahri, but Ahri kind of easily dodges it. And to add insult to injury, when she dodges it, it ends up clipping Sarah. And she's like, fuck. And then the ground begins to quake.
Again, I feel for her so bad. This
feels like, so in the Camp Targon episode, if you guys listen to that one, we talked about the internal abuse and turmoil. Sorry, that
you got there.
I got there. That Lux was going through, right? With all the stuff going on, nothing would let up. It was just relenting thing after thing. This feels like the physical rendition that's happening to Sarah right now.
I got a paddle star in the back. got this corruption going on. Oh God, how bad is that? And
Yeah.
like, am I going to turn into like Zaya and Rakan? Oh God, well, at least the worst if it's over, get clipped by a feather still. Son of a bitch.
It's one of those moments you hope the writer isn't smiling while they're writing this as they torture this character.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but this quake takes us into the final chapter for this part, which is what is found. And the other guardians take to the sky to avoid the tremors. Makes sense. It's a very logical thing to do. They're being protected by a barrier that they think is either Syndra or Janna, not sure, from the falling paddle stars or the falling starlight stuff. And then Sarah, who, would have to stay behind at this point, is on the ground because she can't really move like they can move. She's completely incapacitated at this point. And she tells Zaya, okay, I can't physically do anything anymore. We need to talk and we need to stop this fighting. And Arya agrees, right? And Zaya begins to rant how, they died and then they left them and Zoe brought them back as almost like playthings. And it made me think, zombies?
Zombies.
Are they zombies?
I mean,
You mentioned Puppet Master earlier, which is kind of the nail on the head.
Yeah, and but like zombies really isn't like that far off either, because like it's said like within this rant and alluded to before, like from when Rakan and Zaya first show up, like Misfortune's memories, that they were dead. And then so then not only did they know for a fact that they were dead, they are now standing in front of them, and Zaya and Rakan are saying, "We experienced our deaths. We died." And yet here they are, still acting a fool and like just throwing hands immediately. So it's like, okay, so what is going on
Yeah,
here?
what
So
is true?
yeah, it's like, what is true? Like, what is it that Zoe did to y'all to like keep you here, but also to kill who you were? And the only thing that we do know for a fact is that Zoe is feeding upon their energy.
Yeah.
But the more that Zaya goes on in this rant, the more that it becomes apparent from this rant and when she had Misfortune on the ground and Syndra saved her, um, like it's becoming more apparent that Zoe's feeding off of Zaya more than anyone else. Like Zaya's
Yeah.
feeding into it the most, which I think is one of the reasons why we have Ari and Sarah both being like, please just stop. Like stop. You are making it so much worse, honey.
Yeah, in many ways. And it's like even with Zoe in the sky, she's like drawing this negative energy upwards to her as she's transforming into this monster. And this is the first point where we get a Rakan who, in a calm moment, says, "Why did you guys leave us?" kind of thing. And Ari chimes in saying that they were dead. She was like, "You died." And then the other two were dying, and she had to make the call, which is a callback to what Sarah kept saying while Ari was absent. And she had to make that call before also losing Sarah, who was her last member at that point as a team leader. So she did that, and she was like, "Okay, so we left." And Zaya says, "No, we should all die together." Which, okay, that's some high school drama shit. But Sarah then mentions that she wanted to throw herself at Zoe and die as well, because after that happened, or during that time frame, or sorry, during that event, she knew she wouldn't be able to live with the fear, or sorry, with the grief of what just happened. And this is the part where I have a little hesitation, because as Hetch just mentioned perfectly well, that we keep bouncing around. Did they really die? What really happened? Some are saying they died. Some are saying they were dying. Did they really die? Did Zoe interfere at some point and turn into a puppet master situation? Are they zombies? Like, what is really happening with this? And I think it's being thrown around a bit too much at this point in the story, where it's almost like either give us an answer or don't. Right? Because
Right.
now we're just as confused as we were many parts ago.
Right. I mean, like it, especially since there's been so much Star Guardian content that has been put on our plate with the promise of more coming
Yeah.
sooner rather than later. I'm hoping this is something that we touch on more, because like we know that the corruption has like a tie to Zoe because it was a paddle star that's got it happening to Misfortune right now. So it's like maybe this corruption is the answer there. Does it
Maybe it
actually have
killed
the
her spirit.
yeah, like,
Her
but does it
soul.
have like, is it a mind control thing or
Yeah.
is it a revival thing? Like, do you actually kill the person with it? Like those are questions that we don't know yet. But I mean, I would like to hold out hope that they will answer those questions later on. But for right now, it's just kind of like, we keep touching on it without an answer, and they won't give us an answer. So it's like, so stop touching on it then.
Yeah,
Like,
let's just keep the story going.
yeah,
One thing to notice as well is, we're going back to Light and Shadow, the video again, because it's very important to know that the part where Nico's back, so Nico's fine. Nico's just a standard Star Guardian, right? At this point. Rakan doesn't seem corrupted like Zaya is. It just, he seems like he's protecting Zaya, but Zaya's fully corrupted. So that also makes it more confusing as they're all in three different states of being at this point,
right.
that don't really help. And, Rakan then does something interesting here, which is where we're going to leave off on the story, where he tells Zaya, you know what, stop listening to them since they let them die and they're liars. And then he whispers something to her, and then Ari's ears kind of perk up because she's a fox girl. Don't remember that. I mean, don't forget that part, right?
Yes.
I was thinking about that. I was like, her ears perked up, and then I had to remind myself they're not human, or are they? Who knows? But she's a fox girl.
I mean, we have like two Vistayas who are covered in feathers who can grow them
Yeah.
at will and throw them around that are, in a mortal combat with a half fox, half human, while a Yordle throws a fairy in the face of God.
What are you trying to say to me right now? Just say it. You don't have
I'm trying to say, suspend your disbelief.
Hetch, you're being as cryptic as whether they died or not. All right. And I don't appreciate it. So this ends with Rakan saying this thing. Ari notices, and then they both look up to where Zoe's pretty much finished her transformation. She's preparing her final attack. And then Ari nods and Rakan starts grinning. And that's where we leave off.
Man, what a powerful stance to take as far as like ending, a part, because this is like split up into like these three parts as far as the way that they presented the short story to us.
Yeah.
So even though it's like the 10th chapter, it's like at the end of the second part, and that's a power move to be like, yeah, no, like the bad guy and this girl who has not been present through any of this are now winking at each other like, aha, I know a dirty little secret, and the world's about to end. And it's like, man, that is some power moves right there. But I mean, like, for this one, like, as far as this part, the fighting and the action is definitely what I was more interested in, because a lot of the they do a good job of telling the story as far as like letting us know what happened. Like, the more details that we're getting, we can formulate a picture of what happened in the previous video. So it's like, okay, now we understand that video better. But the dialogue, as you said earlier, is very high schoolish, of just like, we should all have died together. Sign the suicide pact.
Yeah.
Best friends forever.
There should be, I don't know if Star Guardians get, healthcare benefits, but Sarah needs to talk to someone. There's a lot here for obvious reasons. But I mean, it's one of those cases where at this point now, like you mentioned, there's a couple points we want to bring together. So kind of in conclusion, this reinforces our theory that they're planning on releasing some sort of animation in the future, whether it be a feature-length thing like Arcane or a small kind of OVA type approach where it's a few episodes, because the detail that's put into specifically this part on the fights, because there's constant back and forth action, there's a lot of dialogue, like it's set up like almost a screenplay. So we could see that functioning better in that format rather than a pure story. It's almost like they're just flooding us with content, so they have that for that purpose. So we're going to use this as a little detective sleuthing towards our case we're trying to build here. And if we're right, we told you so.
And not like, not only because of like the amount of details they put into like the fights themselves, but the way that they're actually presenting questions with the fights, like we touched on with Syndra being able to hold her own with Zoe up before everybody shows up. Um, it's like, one, we've been pointing out that Syndra is not the most trustworthy, so that's already a big question mark. And that's more of a question that I care about more because it's one that I had to reach for instead of constantly being reminded that, hey, here's a question that we haven't answered yet. Ha ha ha. But not only that, then with the fighting, it's not just that they are, being attacked and they're counterattacking. The details they go into kind of gives you more ideas of like just how powerful some of the Star Guardians are away from the other ones. Like the way that Rakan is able to shield Zaya in some of these fights, it like is almost like way faster than he should be able to move.
Yeah. Oh no, I played League of Legends. That's about right.
Yeah, it's about right.
Everybody's been tortured by Rakans on ladder.
But like, Rakan's speed seems to be faster than some of the other Star Guardians. And then you have, like, everyone is shooting these feathers down, but Syndra is literally eating them. Like, Multi is straight up eating them instead of just, knocking them away or something like that. So it's like, it's like, okay, so there's very minute details in the way that they're fighting too. So why are there details, especially around the most suspect member of the group too? So I think that those things, one, visually it would be better to see it, but it's also more interesting just because it's not harped on over and over again. Like I frankly do not like at this point I was kind of burned out with the but that day, the Lonely Planet is like, no, we got enough of that. All right. We now have enough to formulate the picture.
It's time to answer questions.
And then we escalate to, we all should have died together. And it's like, oh man. Yeah. Okay. I could either ride the emotional roller coaster like I was when I was 15, or I can just hold out for some more action and see how Zoe breaks the planet. I like that one. I'm excited to see how Zoe breaks the planet.
All right. Well, on that positive note, on that very cheery note, that's it for the episode. So once again, you get another badge of honor if you've made it to this part 6 and made it all the way through. We always thank you for listening, and we'll be back soon with the next and final part for this story, Star Guardian episode.
Star Guardian, I believe you mean Stardian episode. All right, well, take care, everybody.